So after the tragic shootings at Sandy Hook in December, President Obama outlined several steps to reduce gun violence in America, including closing the gun show loophole and requiring universal background checks, limiting ammunition magazines to 10 rounds, and reinstating a ban on assault weapons. And as we've seen, there is broad public support for many of these proposals, including from members of the NRA. In the case of background checks specifically, federal law prohibits 10 categories of people from owning a gun: felons and people under indictment for a felony, fugitives, drug abusers. All of these seem reasonable and make perfect sense. And I'm pretty sure we can agree that felons shouldn't own a gun. So why would anyone not want every person who buys a gun to have to go through a background check? Why? At one point, not long ago, even the leadership of the NRA supported universal background checks.
We think it's reasonable to provide mandatory instant criminal background checks for every sale at every gun show. No loopholes anywhere for anyone.
But closing the gun show loophole isn't going to be enough. Having a system like the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, NICS, won't do any good at all if the data is missing. And unfortunately, most of the data is missing. A check of the NICS didn't stop the sale of guns at the Virginia Tech shooter because information about his mental health wasn't in the system. 23 states so far have submitted fewer than 100 mental health records to the database. 17 haven't even submitted 10. And 4 states, including Arizona has more than 120,000 records, and we haven't submitted any of those to the NICS. So what else is needed? What is going to make this work? Well, making reporting to the NICS mandatory instead of optional would be a good start, don't you think? And then it will be funding. We've seen situations before where Congress approves a law and then strangles it by refusing to provide the money needed to make it feasible and sustainable. We can't let that happen again. And even though President Obama supports increased spending on the NICS, it's not nearly enough. Nowhere near enough. Improvements are also needed in the technology. Some states, if they bother to submit their records at all, are still submitting their updates via paper. And in other cases, even if the data is submitted electronically, it's not in a format that can be easily added to the database, and delays happen. And then, of course, there's the issue of state privacy laws. These are also going to have to be dealt with. With regard to banning large capacity magazines, one of the issues is simply how many of these are already in circulation. Because we know that after the shootings in Aurora and Sandy Hook, gun dealers couldn't keep their shelves stocked because demand for these magazines was so high. A 3-year supply of large capacity magazines was sold in less than a month. So not only do we have to deal with the limiting new purchases going forward, but we are also going to have to do something about the existing stockpiles. One of the suggestions has been that there will need to be extensive buyback programs in order to take some of these off the market. Unfortunately, I'm not sure the people who stockpile these magazines in the first place are going to simply turn them back in just because we ask nicely. So here again, we're going to need adequate funding if we hope to see real change. Then we come to the issue of assault weapons. This, unfortunately, will be the most difficult of all the proposals to get through Congress. Not only because of resistance from the NRA, which will be extreme, but simply because the question is not as black and white as we might like to think. Part of the reason why it's going to be so difficult to ban assault weapons is that only 1% of violent crimes are committed with any type of firearm except a handgun. So the NRA and members of Congress will claim that any ban would have a limited impact, so why bother? Another problem is that even as bad as you might like to believe assault weapons are, there simply is no good, clear-cut definition of what an assault rifle really is. In fact, even for the new proposal put forth by Senator Dianne Feinstein, that proposal includes more than 2,200 exemptions and protections for specific firearms. The weapon shown here, while it might look like an assault weapon to you or to me, would be exempted and not included in the ban. Because it's not what the weapon looks like that's important, but how it operates. The challenge that Senator Feinstein faces, and the reason why 2,200 weapons would still be exempted, is that the basic operating system for legitimate hunting weapons and what you and I consider to be an assault weapon are just too similar. Not that we shouldn't try to put a limit on these types of weapons, but just understand how very difficult it really is going to be.